Good evening. My name is Jonathan Sopranowitz. I am the Director of Communications for Greenwich Public Schools. Welcome to those in attendance here at Cos Cob School and those watching virtually at home on Zoom to our School Safety and Security Forum. First, I would like to ask you to stand if able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This evening, we will discuss the many different safety topics, including K through 12 security, secure entryways, and updated video surveillance systems. We have received so many questions from our families and staff throughout the school year. And tonight, we hope to give you answers to those questions and much more. We will also take questions from our in-person attendees towards the end of the program, if time allows. I would now like to introduce to you our distinguished panel. Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Tony Jones. From the Greenwich Police Department, Chief Jim Heavey. GPS's Interim Director of School Safety, Mr. Brent Reeves. And Greenwich Police Department's Sergeant John Thorne. First, I would like to invite Dr. Jones to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Sopranowitz. First and foremost, I just want to thank all three of the gentlemen on my left. They work every day to really keep our school district safe and secure, and I thank you for that. And, you know, from the role of a school superintendent, there really is nothing more important than safety and security of our staff and our students. It's the one thing I always say that trumps student achievement. So I'm really excited to be having this tonight, not only for people who are in the room, people who are online, but we're recording it so that our families have access to be able to learn about how we do work really, really hard to be a safe and secure school district.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Chief Heavey, could you please share with us a little about the relationship between the Greenwich Police Department and Greenwich Public Schools?
Sure. So again, thank you for having us here. And we haven't done one of these in a few years, but so somebody, if you've been to both of them, you've probably heard this story before, but I'll let this person in. Now, if somebody comes to a door to school, unless they have their ID, you should not let them in. But a member of the Board of Education did that just as a test. So as you can see, they've been properly vetted. Okay. So, but I want to start with a little bit of two quick stories. One is a number of years ago when I was a lieutenant, I was going into Glenville School after school hours, but close to the dismissal time, and parked my police car. I'm in my uniform at the time I was a lieutenant. And a woman came running up the path to Glenville front door, and it's officer. Of course, the last thing you want to get called when you're a lieutenant is officer. You know, I took 2 tests to get to be a lieutenant, and she said, "Is everything okay?" And I said, "Absolutely, I'm here." And then the then PTA president, of which I was on the PTA at the time, kind of told her, "Well, don't discourage the police from being here. We like seeing the police." And she didn't realize I was a parent. So then a couple of years later, I was on vacation and I got a call from the then chief to talk about the school resource officer program, which I had done as my master's thesis, and it was going before the board again for consideration. Many years ago, more than 15 years ago, we actually got a grant for a school resource officer at Greenwich High School. And there was a lot of conversation and confusion, I think, about the fact that a police officer could be in the school, but we didn't want him to have a gun because they didn't want a gun in the school. We come as a package. The police officer comes with all the tools, and we can get into that later. But we were able to convince the public and the Board of Education that having a school resource officer at Greenwich High School was a positive. And this is on top of what we were already doing at building relationships with all of the principals. They're kind of the captains of the ship, and every one of the principals has a police officer assigned to their school as a liaison for non-emergency things. Of course, they can call 911 anytime, but that's part of the relationship. A little bit back to the SRO program. when we first started the SRO program, Carlos Franco was selected to be our first SRO. And, it took him 10 years to get out of Greenwich High School. Most of our students get out in 4. But he was significant to the success of the program because of his relationships that he developed with the students, whether that was counseling and teaching and collaborating with the administration. About 6 months before he was going to be coming back to the regular police department, we had his replacement trained, and we put her over there. And by the end of the school year, the principal goes, "Oh no, we need 2 school resource officers." So there became our program with 2 school resource officers at Greenwich High, and it really has paid a dividend. And with over 3,000 people at Greenwich High School, that is the largest collection of individuals during the day anywhere else in town. The only other place would be close to it is Greenwich Hospital. So we think that's a good investment. In addition to that, there are a couple of things else that we do. One, we have 26 school crossing guards that are civilians who help cross our children at schools, and they work for the police department. We also have a school safety patrol. As most of you probably know, a few years ago, after the Uvalde tragedy, we were trying to come up with another system, to another layer of school security in addition to the normal patrol. On a normal school day, there's 11 police officers in marked cars out on the road patrolling their sector, and all of the schools are in a sector. In addition to that, there's a lieutenant and sometimes a sergeant. And we came up with some different plans about having perhaps monitors to help with school physical security. That was not an approved method, so we had to come up with an alternative. That alternative was a school patrol. So this is in its 3rd year, we have a number of officers every day who are strictly assigned to several schools each, and they patrol and visit each school. Now, it doesn't mean they just drive around looking at the school. They get out of their car, they check the exterior of the building, they come into the building, they check the interior, often have lunch with the students, check in with the principal, and try to facilitate anytime they're going to have an event at that school so that they can be present and add that extra layer of security. A good example of that is Old Greenwich School has the pumpkin patch next week, and they have a little bit of a parade in Old Greenwich. So the office, in addition to Car 53, who's the Old Greenwich car, they'll also have their school security safety officer there to help monitor that. So that, in addition to our special victims section, who is really kind of address it. They're detectives who address our most vulnerable population. We have members from that team as part of the interdisciplinary team at the schools when we have challenges with difficult students or difficult problems, that we can work together collaboratively with the principals in each building. So that's just, again, a lot of different layers. I didn't want to hold up. There's a lot of other questions, I'm sure, but that's kind of what we do every day. I talk to the superintendent a lot. And I guess the only thing I can think of is, and it makes me feel old because my oldest is going to be getting married soon, and both her and her brother are products of Greenwich school system that, I still consider myself, I think of it like I had kids in the school, and when the Newtown tragedy occurred, when Sandy Hook happened, I left to go help at the scene as part of the state response. And I didn't think twice about where my kids were. One was at Glenville, one was at Western, because I knew that they were going to be safe. Can I guarantee that every minute? No, but we do so much here as a community-oriented, intelligence-led department, and with our collaboration with the Board of Ed. I think that while we're always continuing to improve, that's kind of the way I think of it. As I'm still a parent, although I still get all the emails as a part of the high school and part of public schools, and that's just one part of our link to the schools.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Reeves, can you please give us a little overview, some of the safety features all of our school buildings have?
Sure. Thank you, Jonathan. Before I get into the features, I think it's really important to kind of give an understanding and a philosophy, if you will, about school security and safety. And you need to think of it as layers of an onion, really. And one of the first layers is really the parents, right? Social, emotional health, forward-looking, looking to the parents to help monitor the children's social media, make the proper authorities aware when something happens or when they hear something, whether that be the PD, which should be the first go-to, or the school itself, which, then we get in contact with the PD. Then we have the relationship that the chief highlighted with the police department. And really that enmeshment between the Board of Ed, the schools, the principals, and the police department is really so important, because without that, it makes it very difficult just to pick up the phone and talk to somebody. And being able to just pick up that phone and having that relationship with the people, whether it be students, staff, officers, administrators, is really an important feature for security, because we have to monitor the social welfare and the mental health of our children, because as we've seen too many times, when the mental health goes unchecked, when there's a problem that we know about and it's not addressed, when someone doesn't say something, that's when tragedy strikes. So really, that's kind of the first layer, right? That's the skin. Then we have the police department right there, kind of absorbing all that, right? The protective shield around our school district, our children, our staff, and into the physical structures with the patrols. And then when we actually get to the district-wide security, now mind you, there are a few things that I'm not going to be able to discuss for security purposes, but some of those things, we call it target hardening, right? And what we want to do is we want to make the schools impenetrable, but at the same time welcoming learning environments. And really, that's the rub. How do it's easy to go build a fortress, right? I can put bricks around the windows and chains on the doors. Fire department wouldn't like that, but but who's going to want to come and learn in that environment? So the balance is a secure learning environment, a secure, welcoming learning environment. So the way we do that is there are features that we can put on the building to harden that building. Certain types of locks, certain types of door closures, certain types of window treatments, access control that can be monitored from a central station so that we know the comings and goings, so that people can't get in and out. Having access control swipe badges and fobs, that gives us the ability to not have to distribute physical keys, which is a security breach, because if you give a key to somebody, it can always be copied, but you can't copy the swipe badge with the RFID on it. So that's the access control component, really, because that's the next layer, is always operating in a secure environment. Unfortunately, gone are the days when we could leave the doors open and parents could come and go through the school and stop in, and visitors might come in to see the school and kids could walk in and out. We no longer want a porous campus. So everything has to operate as a secure environment throughout the school day. And while that can be a pain to parents at times when you come to the school and want to drop things off, understand that when the administrator or the staff doesn't just buzz you in because, quote, they know you, it's because we have security procedures where we don't just let anybody in the building. You have to be properly vetted to get in the building. Why are you here? Who are you? Who's the student that you're coming to see? You respond to the main office under supervision and sign in. These are all important steps to ensure that we don't have people wandering around the school building. Anybody who's not staff or students, their activities and their whereabouts need to be monitored in the school at all times. At the high school, we use what's called the Raptor Management System, because we get so many people who go up to that school to visit or for other reasons. And what that is, they would go to the buzzer at the door. The security guards at the new desk would vet them, find out who they are, what their business is. They would get buzzed into the secure entryway. There's no entry to the school once they're in that vestibule. They still have to be buzzed through the next set of doors. They would hand their ID to the security guard at the desk, and they would run them through the Raptor Management System. And that tells us if there's somebody who should or shouldn't be in a school. At that point, they'll get a visitor badge and they'll be allowed entry to the school to go about their business. At the other locations at the school where there's entry, we have security guards that check those badges and the IDs for the students when they come in. We operate on secure building all the time. All the doors are always locked after all the students are in for the day. And all the IDs have to be checked before they get in. That's kind of a procedural layer, right? And then we also have our camera system. We have over 400 cameras throughout the district. and they're monitored at the central station down at Havemeyer by me and also by the police department. They have they have monitors up in the dispatch center, and the dispatchers can access any of those cameras at any time throughout the entire district to monitor all the schools. The individual administrators at each of the school can monitor the cameras at their own school, and they can also pull up recordings. A lot of times there might be, you know, something that goes on out in one of the fields, or if there was an issue between two students or some suspicious activity, we're able to pull up those recordings and look at those. And this is again where that relationship between the Board of Ed and the police department is so significant, because it's very that they can call up if they need to and say, hey, Brian, I need a copy of that. And, you know, I can burn that copy right away for them. And that's the, you know, the advantage to having worked with these two fellows for 27 years. You know, we have that relationship. Lastly, are you know, access for emergencies, right? So all the schools currently have keeper boxes. I'll briefly describe what those are. Those hold a set of keys to the school that can be accessed by any of the emergency services, primarily the police department, so that when an emergency occurs in the school and the children have to be locked down, after the emergency is over and we have more of a warm or a cold zone, the officers can go in and get those keys, and then they can go into the separate classrooms and escort the children out of the school to safety. Oh, let me just hold up. So these are the badges that everybody has basically, right? So there's the Town of Greenwich badges, and then there's the Board of Ed badges. Not everybody for the Board of Ed has access to those keeper boxes, only certain administrative levels, and all police officers and firemen can get into there as well.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Sergeant Thorne, can you please speak to us on the role you play at the Greenwich Police Department?
So really the role that I play is I can say that currently I'm a detective supervisor with many responsibilities that spread throughout the police department, which includes safety and security for the town of Greenwich school system, houses of worship. I have additional training in threat assessment, as well as physical security assessment. Myself and Officer Palladino and Officer Hirsch, we go around and we do assessments. We teach response to civilian response to active shooter employees. So all the town of Greenwich employees have all had some sort of training, including the Board of Ed. We do it yearly at the principals meetings. That's where we start with it. Throughout the year, I end up going to multiple school staff meetings, just speaking to all the teachers on what they can do, what they can't do, different responses, things like that. But a majority of it still comes down to, I know that as we're going to ask questions of where are we now? Like Brent Reeves just said, Mr. Reeves just said, to where were we, right? We have come a long way in this district with safety and security that starts normally with employee compliance, and we have that structure already fixed and ready to go. But on a daily operations, majority of it, and the chief can say that I wear multiple hats all the time with a lot of different things that go on with in regards to safety and security for the town of Greenwich, whether it's at town hall, whether it's the Board of Ed, whether it's the school districts, and whether it's houses of worship. I work daily in conjunction with multiple jurisdictions and multiple other agencies, including the fire department.
Great. Thank you, Sergeant. I'm now going to ask the panel some questions that we regularly get from parents, emails, phone calls, and we hope we have some of your questions. Last month, again, we saw another school shooting, this time in Georgia. And I'll ask the panel, what can we do at GPS to make sure that doesn't happen here?
So one of the things that we do is we're always looking at after actions. Matter of fact, before we started this meeting, Sergeant Thorne and Mr. Reeves and I were discussing some of our recent drills at some of the schools here in town, and how we look at everything went well, what didn't go well, and how we can improve it. So one of the things is we want to make sure that there's no complacency, and sometimes that can easily happen. There's a door which would be easy to get out to the recess, and someone forgot their key card, so they stick a book in it to you know, and I know librarians will be mad at me about that, but so that it'd be easy to get the students out to the playground and back. So we have to kind of go over those types of things. When these other events do occur, our department is tied in with all the federal agencies. I'm a national FBI Academy graduate, so I have access to the secure after action reports from the various incidents. So soon after them, there's often some information that we get that says, hey, and I'll give you one example. After Sandy Hook, after speaking with the chief there, was to have every police officer, his access card that gets him into the police station would be able to get into every public school. And they actually work in some of the private schools as well. And the private schools that aren't on our system, we have another way to get in. So that access is very important. So we were able to add that to a layer. And again, one of the advantages we have here in town is that interdisciplinary agency that identifies perhaps a student that might be having some issues. One of the things, and maybe Superintendent will talk a little bit more about it, but there's a gaggle. You know, if you have a Greenwich Public School device and certain words or certain phrases are used, they're going to get an alert. And we have a whole different partnership compared to other places where that happens on a Friday or Saturday night or Sunday morning. The principal's going to be made aware of it. They're going to contact their school resource officer or their liaison, and we're going to go to the house and knock on the door and say, hey, what's going on? If somebody makes a comment, self-harm or a threat to the school or somebody else, so that we can address it. And we take that stuff seriously. And it's that immediate response that could probably prevent a tragedy. And also sometimes there are people who are in crisis, and it's not just to get people in trouble, it's also to get them help. So that those things are sometimes a call for help, and we'll address that as it goes. One of the disadvantages, I guess, is we can't talk about all the successes we have about people who are having crises, family crisis or mental health issues, and that the school and the police department, we, like in a holistic effort, try to address those without making a lot of fanfare, because we want those people, when they are in crisis, to feel like we're the people they can go to. We're the helpers. They can come to us to address their issues. And because of that, that's another way for us to reduce that threat or that risk to the school system.
If I could just add to that, another feature of the relationship between the police department, the Board of Ed, and the school resource officers, and again, falling back on that enmeshment, is threat and risk assessments. When there's concerning behavior brought to the attention of administrative staff, there's procedures in place where either a threat or a risk assessment is conducted by a counselor. All the threat and risk assessments in the district get funneled through the school resource officers so that nothing slips through the cracks. Those are then reviewed, used to be me, now it's John. And when the student is found at low risk, then it's kind of case closed. It just gets documented. There's a paper trail on it. But when the student's found at risk, there are certain other steps that the police take over, and they run the family to see if there are any weapons in the house. If there are weapons, they will make direct contact with the family to determine if they are aware of proper weapon storage, and also to make sure that the children don't have access to those weapons, and that's all documented. And that's really a very important feature, because that goes back to the mental health and some of that forward-looking deterrence that we need to have in the district.
And I guess I just want to give one thing also to that, is that there are those who are very much against having school resource officers in schools. And when we tried to get that grant accepted in 2009 and we got rejected, I was shocked. You know, I really was. And then years later, when we got the school SROs into the schools and it was such success, I can only imagine the torches and pitchforks that would be at Havemeyer or at the police station if now we decided to change that level of security. But I also want the people who are, people are very apprehensive about having the police in the schools, like, oh, it's not part of the system, is that we need to make sure that people understand that we're part of society, we're part to protect and make sure that everyone's healthy. But also, we're not looking to, I hate when I see, articles about, it's a pipeline to the jails that, the police are going to arrest everybody. We've had a school resource officer at Greenwich High School for 15 years, and have made only very few arrests and only as a last resort. We use the school's disciplinary system whenever possible. And we also, one of the things that Greenwich is very fortunate to have is we have a juvenile review board, which is made up of Greenwich residents to do a contract with a juvenile violator rather than put them into the judicial system. So if they make a mistake, they make a correction, say somebody vandalizes something and we have them clean it up, they do community service, they sign a contract with their parents. And after 13 months, if they've committed no other crime, they're not going to have a police record. And we have a very low level of recidivism. Usually you go through the review board once, that's the end of your misdeeds. So it's very successful in that aspect. And that's just one example of how the police aren't there to make lots of arrests. The other thing that, again, we're looking at every day, we get used to it, is that all the officers are trained medical responders, EMTs or emergency medical responders. So we have the medical equipment with the officers, and they're able to respond to support the nurse in the building in case of an emergency. And that's come in handy in a couple of instances where there's been a significant trauma, so that the officer's there with the nurse before GEMS arrives. And again, we respond to all the emergencies. If there's a fire alarm, we send a police car to make sure that there's no issue with that as well. So that's just another part of that whole system. I'm sorry, John, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm good. You guys hit all the points.
I'm just going to add one thing. I think because I go back to the question and it's how we can prevent it.
Right.
And I do think we hit on how we actually monitor our students. I think that's an enormous part of it. And it starts happening all the way down in elementary with Securely. So we're making sure that our students are on devices that are safe and not going out to unsafe places where people can be contacting them. We do use Gaggle, which the chief mentioned, and that has literally saved lives because if a student is writing a suicide note or something like that at the library on a Saturday, our software will pick it up. It's an outside company that helps us monitor all of that. Or if they have a threatening note that they're writing, it would pick that up. But we also have anonymous alerts, which I think is really
Getting ready to say that.
yeah, really important because, not every student, even though that we want them to feel comfortable to go to an adult and report it, sometimes they're afraid for a variety of reasons, and having anonymous alerts is wonderful. And it gives them an opportunity to report something without having to give their name. The other side that I would say is also just, and I think we mentioned it, is just being proactive in how we are taking care within the school of our students' mental health. And I look back at COVID, and one of the big issues we were having in COVID, it was pretty traumatic for children. Their life changed so quickly. And we didn't have social workers, for instance, in the elementary at all. And we used our federal grant funding to put those positions in immediately. So we had social workers at all 11 elementary schools. And then we worked over the last couple of years to build that into the operating budget. So when the grant went away, we still have that support. And we needed it for years. We now have it. We also have a program called ESS, Effective School Solutions, which is a very high-level therapeutic program for students who are struggling, and that's offered in middle school and high school. So I think part of it is also how are we equipping our schools and the resources, human resources, to make sure that if students are struggling, that they're connecting with an adult, and we have the resources that they need for us to connect with parents as well. And sometimes that's going beyond the school and helping parents and the guardians connect with those resources in town. And we're very fortunate in the town of Greenwich. We have a lot of resources.
Not to sound like boastful parents, but we also have Teen Talk in all
Yeah.
three middle schools, which is a counselor who doesn't have a normal schedule, but they are available for all those last minute circumstances where a student might need to talk to somebody, and they back up the regular social workers in the school so that they don't have, because they can have an overwhelming caseload and not have any time for emergencies. But this person is able to kind of cover them during lunch hours and lunch breaks and be able to get out and talk to the kids who might need that little extra contact with a supporting adult.
Dr. Jones, you mentioned the anonymous alerts at the high school. Are there thoughts about extending that to the middle school? And
Yes.
Yes.
And what about the police department? Is there a way for folks to alert the police department anonymously?
Sure, absolutely. We have our tip line, so you can do an email or you can call into a number, or you can call our non-emergency number at any time, the 203-622-8004. You never have to leave your name. Now, again, we won't allow ourselves to be weaponized, so we have to always be cautious. I'm sure people have heard of things called swatting, which is when people call the police unnecessarily and send us on an emergency that doesn't exist. So our dispatchers are highly trained to triage these types of calls. But if somebody has to call about an anonymous thing, an example, and again, it's a challenge for us. Sometimes we get calls for underage drinking, and someone will call in. Sometimes it's even another youth. Maybe they didn't get invited to the party, or they didn't want to have anybody get hurt. I'm hoping they have a good reason for calling us, but we'll go and we'll talk to the parents. Sometimes it's a lack of supervision, and we prevent the party from happening and prevent any problems from happening. So absolutely, we can do that. And of course, if it's an emergency, call 911 and we'll get there right away.
I just want to jump in real quick here. I just want to make sure everybody understands there's so many multiple layers between the Greenwich Police Department and the Board of Ed that people don't see, right? Whether it's mental health, whether it's physical security, whether it's all the way through from police officers volunteering as coaches, whether it's intercommunity things. There's a lot of it that people don't see. And I understand the reason we have these panels like this, but please take away that your children are in a very good place. It's the town of Greenwich with the town of Greenwich educators and the town of Greenwich police. So I just want to make sure we're pretty clear on that.
And there's two additional resources that we also use, actually three. We work very closely through the interagency team at the high school with Kids in Crisis and Human Services. And that's really a referral program. So when a student is identified with needs, because of the amount of resources in the community, we're able to plug those in through this agency and get them the support they need. And over the last few years, the two school resource officers at the high school have developed a relationship with a few different teams of therapy dogs and have them regularly visit the high school. And they're also on call when there's a traumatic event to bring those to any school that might need them.
Just about every interagency team within the town of Greenwich has a police officer either sitting on the board or is getting reported back to me on what transpired. Is the easiest way to do that. The SROs are on the Selectmen's Advisory Board for Youth, the Youth Commission, the list goes on and on. Police Explorers, it just continues.
Great. I'd like to throw it to the panel about social media. We've had a bunch of incidents where possible threats are being shared on social media by our students. How is the investigation process started, and how do you know when it's credible or not credible?
Well, let Sergeant Thorne answer that with all the details, but I will tell you, so when my kids were younger, it was easier to put the computer where we could see it and monitor it. But then these things get given to children earlier and earlier. And I as a parent, I really recommend that maybe you wait till eighth grade before they get one of these. You could have, again, it's a great resource, but it should be limited because of the exposure they can get to unwelcome, unsafe internet activity. But you can get phones that work so that they know if you're going to be late or they need to get picked up early. They went to, instead of going to the chess club, they went to the French club and now they need a ride or whatever. So it's handy, but it's not, it is a vulnerability. So again, always constantly having them be cyber smart about things, because we have adults who get taken by financial crimes every day. We have a detective assigned to a FBI task force just to handle financial crimes that are occurring on the phones and on the internet all the time. So it is a significant risk that posed to the children.
So just to really put it in perspective, the investigation process on social media, that's no different than any investigation that we would normally do for any other crime that's reported to us, right? So we have to take the credibility, we have to take into consideration the who, what, when, where, how, why, right? Other agencies, other departments. If it's happening up north, I mean, we had it a couple of weeks ago that it hit multiple school districts in Bridgeport. Trumbull area. You had one in Oxford last Friday that came down and through. We're monitoring this daily and seeing what's going on. That's conversations with Mr. Reeves, goes back to the chief's office, which then goes to Dr. Jones. So there's conversation all the way through on what transpires with social media credibility. And then by the time, if it is credible, what transpires, the normal, you have to still remember, even though you're a juvenile and even though you still have rights, right? So we just can't go storming the castle and doing things like that. We have to make sure that we take into consideration all the things that go with that as well. But social media itself, I know some of the questions always asked, how do we get it? How do we see it? Well, that's our police department. We have that nationwide, whether it's through CTIC, whether it's through the intelligence center vetting things, or whether it's our own crime analysis throughout the day and our own officers actually surfing social media and the options that we have to do that as well.
Last Tuesday, the Fairfield County Chiefs met, and CTIC, which is an intelligence component of the Connecticut Public Safety Department, reviewed some of the messages that were coming over as threats to schools, and identified where they were coming from and familiar similarities. And then last week, our dispatchers, our public safety dispatchers, all were on, a good number of them were online for a class themselves on how to address some of those cyber threats and how we deal with them in the schools. Because again, the disruption can be significant, and we recognize that sometimes that's used as a distraction for something else or to get a day off from school.
I'd just like to throw a resource out there to have it documented if you need it. And that's the platform that we used in the PD, and I still use it now in my current role for cyber safety for students and parents. Is the web address is missingkids.org, and that's NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And if you go to the education tab on there, they will provide you with age-appropriate cyber safety materials that you can read and or print. It talks about, types of platforms. It talks about when the kid should, be on the phone, how to have conversations with your children about getting a phone and who they're talking to, who is a trusted adult that you can go to, gives tips to parents on some of the more difficult conversations to have with children as they get older about certain types of material. But it's a great resource, and that's the platform that we use.
Great, thank you. I want to change the subject a little bit to graffiti in our schools that's derogatory to any one particular group or a direct threat to everybody. When it's discovered, let's say on the wall of a bathroom, what happens? Can you walk us through a scenario where you find something like that?
You
Want me to take that one?
doesn't matter. So what transpires in that, we obviously have to then work closely with the Board of Ed security, see, for instance, how many children have been going into that bathroom? Was it a locked bathroom? Was there different parts of that investigation as it goes? Then from there, what does the actual graffiti say? Is it just, I'm going to say this, for instance, is it a swastika, right? Okay. Then from there, what was there? Was there any other verbiage with it? And we try to backtrack the investigation of who, what, when, why, and how. And then eventually, if it turns out that we can develop a suspect or develop who or why or anything to that nature, all those interagency teams come together with the police department, parents, et cetera. So it's very complex, but it could get to the severity of what? Every police officer in town is at the high school, which we know happened how many years ago, right? And that was, by the time that happened, we had 70 police officers at the high school.
So one of the things too is with the school principal, once we document the graffiti, we'll get it cleaned up as quickly as possible. Some of the officers have actually gotten the spray that removes paint and help the custodial staff do that, because we want to resume normalcy as quickly as possible. A lot of times these things are not so much done as for hateful reasons. They're done for immature reasons to just distract people, and that doesn't give them any excuse for it. And then we also try to make it an educational thing. If we do identify someone who puts some symbol of hate, to try to have them understand what effect that has on the group that they might be bothering. So that they're going to do that. And it's, like I said, it doesn't happen a lot, but we do get, we had the similar instances on the same classroom, same desk over a couple of incidents and same bathroom type of thing. So we'll look at that. And with the cameras and with the good supervision that the school provides, we're usually able to identify them at some point.
So I can just peek back to a case we actually had. It worked out very well for both the student that the chief is explaining the same situation, that didn't realize what that symbol meant by the time they put it down. And we worked closely with the Board of Ed. And then by the time it was done, that student got accepted into the Juvenile Review Board program and actually worked very well. And I signed off on it and said, okay, let's move on instead of putting it into the whole, let's go to juvenile court. Let's start the attorney fees. So that program does work.
And I might just add, before we even get to the police, we have a protocol so that all of our principals, our teachers, they know if something like that happens. What we don't want someone to do is erase it immediately because they see it and because we need to be able to investigate. And so they know, like they take a picture, that they are documenting if it's in the restroom to lock it down right away. And that's before we even get the response person on site. So we have a good protocol in place so that all of our staff know what to do.
And then one of the resources that we lean on is the ADL, because we look at these as, educational opportunities. And for the JRB, that could be one of the consequences is to go through a program at the ADL.
When incidents like this happen, communications department sends out information to parents in that school that might hear the news from their children. And sometimes our communications are vague. Sometimes parents respond, tell me more. Why are they intentionally vague sometimes?
Well, one, we don't want to copycats. And two, it only re-traumatizes the group that they may be offending by us putting out a lot of detail about it. So those are two reasons. And then it does bring up a good point, though. Sergeant Thorne referenced, we had an incident where we thought there was possibly a gun at Greenwich High School, and within 6 minutes, we had about 70 officers there. It took us several hours to clear the school, make sure that the situation was resolved, and it ended up being a facsimile weapon. But really look at the information that the Board of Education is sending you. They're going to send you the best information that they can at the time, and heed their requests not to self-dispatch yourself to the scene. One of the challenges we had at that incident at the high school was we had over 100 parents show up. And that distracted my staff from what they were working on, because now we had to manage parking and very irate parents who wanted to see their child right away. And we were in lockdown. We had a situation where I couldn't get to my kids, and I was in the command post, but we were working on other things. So I would encourage you not to get sucked into the social media, repeating things unless you have some facts about it, or if you're not sure about it, contacting the authorities. But occasionally on social media, I'll have somebody call me and say, did you hear about this? And I'll look at it, and it started out as some vague message. And then the next thing you know, it's ballooned into something that's alarming, but isn't factual at all. So I think that's one thing that the Board of Ed's really good. I mean, we'll talk, Dr. Jones and I will talk immediately about some significant event, and we'll send out a joint message so that we're all in the same, we're not going to send out something that's contradictory to the Board of Ed, but we'll work together to make sure we give you as much information as we can and let you know what we would have to do. Again, we're always looking at what we might have to do. We had the earthquake at Central Middle School, and we had to move the students to the high school. And we learned from that, and I think it went very well, but we also had some challenges about ways we could improve it. And we've actually been working on a plan for reunification. So we're discussing a location where we could send students if we had to close a school for any number of reasons. And that way the parents could go and get their children at the appropriate time. But we don't want people to, when they self-dispatch, you have to recognize that you're going to be distracting from the response. A good point to bring up.
I think everyone plays a little role in spreading rumors on social media, right? If you read Greenwich Connections on
I
Facebook.
intentionally didn't mention that.
Or Greenwich Moms. or-
Greenwich Moms, yeah.
And
Right?
the list goes on and on.
What can we all do to help not spread these rumors?
Can I just say one thing that I've said to PTA, because I meet with them every month, is that if you do see something growing online, don't assume that as a school superintendent, I know. I'm not on a lot of those sites on the weekend. I'm doing other things. And sometimes it starts to grow and we're the last people to actually hear it. So don't ever hesitate to reach out and let us know if something on Facebook got posted and people start responding, because it could cause a lot of concern. And by the time we see it, it has grown, as Chief Eby was talking about, and we'd love to get in front of it if people just let us know.
So on that same note, I do a lot of training, whether it's outside of work, whether it's inside of work, students, et cetera, high school sports, all the different things. And the biggest thing we do for threat assessments and physical security and situational awareness, right, is the big key words that we like to use. But we all see it when we go to the airport. We all see it when we go to different places and we travel, right? It says it on the billboard, on the train station. What does it say? See something, say something, right? I bring it down to the Greenwich level, which is do something versus nothing, right? If you do something, right? If you did something positive, it's going to help us, just like Dr. Jones said, did we know about it? Did we see it? But if you did something negative on that post, which was now you just continued the whole thing. So we always like to say, do something versus nothing, and don't assume that somebody else told the police or told the Board of Ed. Right? So just let us know is the easiest way.
It's human nature. We get a very serious accident and we often get one phone call on it. And then you have a little fender bender where there's, two moms backed into each other and there's a little scrape on one car. We'll get 25 calls. So it's just the nature of it's just human nature. So we'd rather get multiple calls and get there and sort it out than somebody not say something. So if you see something, say something, it really does make a difference for us. You'll never get chastised. Well, oh, why'd you call us on that? That guy's fine. Like we had a call just today on an individual who was on school property taking pictures at a school. So somebody questioned them and called us and we responded and looked into it. And it wasn't it wasn't anything we had to take action on, but we resolved the issue right away. But again, that could have been one of those ones that if it was on social media, it could have, it would be blown out of proportion by the end of the day.
If I could just go back to social media for a moment, Jonathan, you had asked, well, what can we do about this? It's really comes down to that first line of defense. Again, the parents really monitoring their children's social media and understanding that the parents own the device. It's not the child's device. They're too young to engage in a contract. They can't sign off on it. They can't pay the bill. So, and a lot of times parents don't understand that they have the right to take that device and look through it and make sure there's nothing inappropriate on that phone. And this is something that we go through when we do cyber safety talk. So really the parents are integral in this process, really, of going through the devices and making sure that the children are behaving in a proper civic way and not engaging in this kind of keyboard bullying and things like that.
Great, thank you. I want to change gears just a little bit. I've heard 3 different phrases: a lockdown, a shelter in place, and a secure the building. Can we address what the differences are between those 3?
Want me to take it?
Yeah, feel free.
So lockdown is the most severe. Lockdown would be if we had an active assailant in the building. That's where the administrators would call lockdown, activate the mass notification system, which goes directly to the PD to get the troops on the way. What they would do in the schools procedurally is the teachers would check in the hallway, grab any students that are nearby their classroom, their area of responsibility, pull them into the classroom, lock the door, shut the blinds, put the kids in the safest corner of the room away from doors and windows, and make sure the room is dark and have the children be as quiet as possible. That's a lockdown for active assailant. Shelter in place, you might have for other reasons. Maybe the police are chasing an armed robber or an assailant out in the street, maybe in proximity to a school. They would advise the school and the school could go into a shelter in place. Now what that is, that's kind of a secure building plus where the building is secure, nobody in or out. The students will remain in their classrooms with the door locked but business as usual in the classroom. Teaching continues. There will be no passing through the halls when the bell rings. Everybody would just remain in their classroom, business as usual. And then the secure building, that's where nobody is in or out of the school. That could be something environmental. There, maybe there was an accident with some hazmat outside. We don't want the children going outside. Something even as a rabid animal running around in the field. We don't want the children coming out of the building. So there's a variety of reasons that we have these different levels of secure building, shelter in place, and lockdown. And John, if you could just hold up. In all of our classrooms, we have one of these guides that gives very quick instruction to the teachers and administrators. And then
We also flip chart if they have time to do it, but more than likely, you're going to go
this one.
to the quick flow chart that says, okay, the PA announcement says secure the building, right? So they can go quickly to this, follow the flow chart, continue teaching as they need to go through. It's the all hazards approach that we teach yearly to all new staff, substitutes, et cetera.
And in all three circumstances, you will be denied access to the building till those particular circumstances have changed. So if any of those three conditions are at the building that your child is at, you will not be able to get in. During one of the lockdowns at the high school, one of my captains was teaching a class and he got locked in with his class on civics, and he wanted desperately to get out and help us with the police matter, but the teacher was not having it. He got locked in and he had to stay with them until the event cleared. So and we also when we did have that incident at Greenwich High School a number of years ago, we learned from it to make sure that there were portable toilet facilities and that there were snacks in case there was a diabetic student. And we worked with the nursing staff at the schools so that we could address those medical emergencies that might occur when you're in one of those circumstances like a lockdown. So we still address that. And when we do a lockdown, we also coordinate with the fire marshal and the fire department, not to have the number of fire trucks respond, but the fire marshal will respond and the fire department will be on standby to assist us if needed with other matters. And to that end, we also have the police, fire, and EMS train in the summertime. We have, unfortunately, we train for the worst case scenario. So we spent some time at Glenville School. We spent time at Hamilton Avenue School. We've done private schools drilling these circumstances where the officers do their actual response, have to clear building, have to clear classrooms. So it's something we train on a lot. So, it's hopefully something we never have to do in real life, but it is kind of reinforced with regular training and interoperability between the other agencies.
And then we also do drilling through the school district throughout the year. We do 11 fire drills a year, 2 lockdown drills, and 1 shelter in place drill, which is mandated by the state. Those are all documented, and then the forms are sent up to the state.
With minimal interruption of their educational process.
I think we touched on this a little bit about the patrols around our schools. If I see a police car in front of my school during drop off, during pickup, should I be nervous? Does
No.
that mean something is happening in my school?
Right. So there could be 2 police cars in front of your school just by happenstance. One might be covering the school crossing guard because they called out sick or weren't able to be there. And then one might be the normal patrol. But when we were studying school resource officer, I went out to Blue Springs, Missouri to study. They're very similar size to us. I studied their program, and I was in the car with the SRO director, the sergeant who ran it, and he got a call from a principal who was all upset that the parents were calling because the SRO's parking space had this a van in it, and the police car was missing. And what it was the SRO's car, the marked police car, it wouldn't start. So he had to drive his wife's car to get to school. So by the end of the day, they had the police car towed and fixed up so that he could have his police car. But people must come to expect it. They want to see that. So I will tell you, though, that we're coming into budget season. So the first year that we did this extra school patrol, there were 5 patrol staff, so they're on overtime. We took 5 cars from our fleet that we already had and sent them out to do this job. again, this third year, we are actually funded for four positions. We had to take an officer from regular patrol staff. So I'm not sure what the budget guidelines will be for continuing to support that. I recognize, as well as the Board of Ed and the BET, that it's not a sustainable model to have a number of officers cover a responsibility like that on a regular basis on overtime. So we know we're considering a number of factors with that, and that may be something that we might seek support for if we decide that we're going to direct that in another way. I still think that having officers cover it rather than a private security, armed or unarmed, is more reliable. They have better training and a better relationship. I'll be honest with you, the officers actually like that duty more than regular patrol because of the interaction they get to have with the students. They really do think that they're doing an important, their job is important, but it's even more important when they're building those relationships with the students. And like I said, we know some of our best officers happen to be coaches in the school system now too, as well. So.
Fantastic. I've exhausted all of my questions. I'd like to open it up to any of folks in our audience. If you have a question, can you please raise your hand? I'll come over with a microphone and please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Jamie Bowl. I have 3 kids in the school system. I also went through this Greenwich school system. I have been kind of campaigning, I guess is the right word, for better school safety in our school system since my firstborn was in kindergarten. He's now in 8th grade. And I do appreciate everything that's been done. I feel like we've done a lot, that you've done a lot, and we appreciate it. We've been heard. But we still feel, and I represent kind of a bigger group. We've asked to have SROs, or whatever we want to call them, retired police officers at every school, monitoring with monitors, but also to make sure that everybody that comes in the door is checked and approved. Right now, and I don't want to say the school that I'm in, but right now it's the administrative assistant who is overwhelmed and has a lot on her plate. So, that's what we're looking for. And other school districts all have it, New Canaan, Darien, most of the nation, as far as I understand. So just curious if there's plans for that, and if you could speak to that.
Sure. So I can tell you that Dr. Jones and I worked on a program to have a monitor at each school, and that proposal was rejected by the RTM. So we went back to the drawing board, and I came up with the plan. I actually had 5 different versions of the plan that we're currently using, some with more officers, some with less. And this was the one that was approved. One of the challenges is that, there's a statutory requirements as far as retired officers. We do have some retired officers who work as police officers part-time. They're called special officers, but it would be difficult for us to have enough of them to cover schools all the time. The other thing is that if you have a single individual at a single access point, they're not going to be able to be there all the time. And I'll be honest with you, some of the person I mentioned that the principal is the captain of the ship, but in the Navy, they have the chief of the boat. That's the senior enlisted person who helps the captain run the ship. And that's what a lot of times is the administrative assistant. And we do give them training and try to help them understand that. But some of the challenges is people being understanding that we don't let somebody else in. If we're going in the door, we don't let somebody else in, and that they're patient and understanding when they ask for ID and those types of things. We do have some capital plans for improvement to the access control, much like the high school's access now has the vestibule. So there's some schools that are physically, some older schools are actually better for security, and some of the newer schools are better for security. We're trying to get a balance with that. I don't know whether or not the town has the fiscal desire to put an officer at every school, and that would be difficult. Even if we were to add a few officers a year for a number of years, it would be difficult to get that. I'm having a hard time. The recruiting retention is a challenge as it is. So not as an excuse, but I just think the current system where it's coordination with the principal, and the officers are assigned to a limited number of schools for that day. So they do have to travel in between the schools. Most schools, there's one patrol that the two schools are distant apart, but they have less schools in that particular zone so that they can spend a lot, they end up spending a lot more time in the school rather than traveling between the schools. So I'm sorry, I'll give you a long answer to a question I don't have the answer to. I think that it would be, I think that they're willing to support us to a certain amount, but again, it's limited. And again, things are, the things have changed. When I became a police officer, there were 175 full-time sworn officers. When I became chief 13 years ago, there were 155. We now have 152. We leverage technology, and we try to use other things other than the number of officers to generate a more effective service, not necessarily a larger service.
And I do just want to add, I think it being in the third year of this new model, this program that we have, I feel like our safety is fantastic. When you're out in our school, not only do they engage with the students and they feel comfortable with the officers, but you see them all the time. They're not just driving by in their cars. They get out, they walk in, they walk around the perimeter, they're checking doors. Some of our buildings, as you know, have outside doors off of every single classroom almost. They check doors to make sure that a door didn't get stuck open. They're doing a lot for us every single day. And I'm very grateful for what we have.
So I could chime in on that just to help you a little bit on that. So with the hardening of the buildings, that's the term we like to use. We also train the police officers to expectations. So the expectations of police officers, when we developed the plan, I say we because I was an integral part of it, of how many officers, how many schools, the distances, and the time that it takes to actually check a school to make sure that everything is secure, or did we find a door open, or is that door not locking? Well, they thought it was working, it was locked. Well, no, they didn't notice it until the officer went and checked it because it's a broken gym door. I understand what you're asking. I personally do, but I can tell you that because of the program and because of where physical security assessment, as well as cameras, video monitoring, et cetera, how we can now limit access to the school by controlling access, right? Is the easiest way to, if you look at some of these schools, the old years ago, only one door, come in, the admin buzzes you in because she's on the phone and so forth. Well, now that can't happen that way. We have you going through what? One door, sit and wait, you're going through another door. We're doing that on purpose, right? Because if it's bad, I want to do what? Slow you up until who? Till we get there. That's the real truth of how physical safety and security works, right? And now educators have to end up doing what? Something versus nothing until we get there is really how we could do the safest part of this.
Hi, my name is Robin Lader. I have 3 kids in the district. My question actually continues with that, is not the safety of the schools, not during the school day, but at the start of the school, like, you know, when the kids are coming in, right? Because there are multiple access points. Then obviously we've had at Western, they had somebody come in who wasn't at the school anymore. How are you, I know parents were saying they came in for early meetings at the high school a couple of weeks ago and they just walked in before school starts and the doors are all locked at 8:30. How are you preventing people from coming in that shouldn't be in?
So again, part of it is we're at the team, so that the custodial staff and the administration of the school come up with an opening plan. And then sometimes they'll call us if they find something suspicious or somebody not in the building. I will say that one of my challenges is that, 25% of the Greenwich High School population stays after school for clubs and sports, which is great. And there is some security staff that stays on a later shift. But the officers know that. So if an officer has to write a report, they'll park in the high school parking lot. We do little things that make us aware of that. We have the school patrols. We have modified their time so that they're all out on their patrols in advance of the school starting. But it is a vulnerability. I went every year. I go to every single school on the first day of school. This year I made 13 out of 15 because I had a new officer, the Officer Bear with me, and the kindergartners were having too much fun with them, so it slowed me down a little bit. But it's a great time to see that enthusiasm at the door, but you have children who are upset leaving their parents, and you have parents, some ecstatic and some some sad that have the child go in. So that is a vulnerable time, the beginning of the day and the end of the day. So we've done little tweaks with the way we dismiss, like this year, and it's worked out so far. We changed the traffic pattern at Greenwich High to get the buses and the cars out of there quicker, because, if we can disperse the mass sooner, it's less of a target, and it's also good for the traffic and good for the neighbors. So we've done that now since the beginning of school year, and it's actually worked pretty well. So we modified the way we do that. So, but again, that's another thing that the parents can help with, is recognizing that that's a stressful time for the staff. Maybe, I kind of made fun of it a couple of times, the enable table. You go into some schools and they have the forgotten lunch and the musical instrument, the sneakers for gym, and that distraction to the administrative staff can reduce the security. So try to tighten up, make sure that everyone brings everything at the same time, and that we don't make unnecessary visits to the school, and especially those busiest times.
So
I take the bus. That's the other thing, in my neighborhood, I had to drop my children off at Glenville School because we lived like a quarter of a mile too close to the school. But now they've since changed that rule, because I see my neighbors' kids getting on the bus when I leave for work. But, having your children take the bus is a big help. Not to encourage that, but I sometimes see buses leaving that are nearly empty.
So I can speak directly to the security of the buildings at the start of the day. There's only one access point at every school when school is open. It's monitored by administrative staff. They stand there, and I actually watch them on the camera in the morning. I keep the front entrance of every school in the district on my computer in the morning, and I watch to make sure that the door is closed at the proper time after all the students have come in. Greenwich High School has new procedures in place. I'm not going to go into them, but for the secure entry in the vestibule, people are vetted, they're brought into the vestibule, and then they go through the visitor management system after the doors are secured. While the students are coming in the morning, when the door is unsecured, there's 2 guards at the station, one behind the desk and one standing in the vestibule to actually watch the children as they're coming in. And then once the doors are secured, the second guard remains there in that vestibule.
Does everybody understand, like, even at the smaller elementary schools, right? Mr. Reeves talked about the added layer of protection and keep peeling back the onion. Well, when our teachers are out in front of the school, what are they actually doing? They're hired to unlock your car and get your child out? Are they actually doing what? Seeing what's going on, seeing what's happening throughout the day, bringing the children in, because that does what? All those extra sets of eyes are out there at the same time.
And
So-
they know the population. They know, like I said, we did have the incident at Western, but it was a number of circumstances that created that unfortunate occurrence,
Correct.
staff change and, it was one of those, it was a vulnerability, absolutely. But under normal circumstances, the principal or the staff member would have recognized there was an issue and then addressed it. So, and we've done some things to reduce that chance.
And our after action report from Western and from the other schools has a staff meeting, and I go there and say, these are a couple things, nobody did anything wrong, but these are the things that went wrong. And let's try to improve on these things for these particular reasons.
School security is a team effort, and we're safer today than we were 3 years ago.
I'd say we're way further down the road than we were 3 years ago.
I was hoping you could speak more about the communication to parents, because like, if there is an incident or a perceived incident, similar to the high school a couple of years ago where nothing went out, the kids all knew about it and they all sort of ran out of the school at 1 o'clock. 11:30,
No.
when there is an incident and you do email with the parents, how often should they expect to hear from you again when, Western's lockdown, it's just, and if you don't want them to come to the school or don't want them picking up their kid, is there something they can do or should do? Because just sitting at home waiting not knowing when the next email is coming is not easy.
So one of the things that, and again, well, the guy holding the mic will give you the best answer, but one of the things that we try to do is say, hey, this is what the circumstances are. And we're going to back to you in 30 minutes or in 1 hour to give you an additional update. And that we anticipate school dismissal will be at the normal time, or that there may be an adjustment. One of the challenges we have, the school buses get sometimes more than one, they do more than one route, more than one school. So we have to sometimes factor that in if we have to do a late dismissal or an early dismissal, and making sure that we had an incident that Dr. Jones and I addressed because we had a grammar school, and you can't let grammar school kids go home an hour early and expect that a mom or dad or a guardian is going to be there on time. So we have to factor those things in. But I think that, that is one of the things that we try to do is do an initial and then have a follow-up, as quickly as possible. But sometimes it's an evolving information we're trying to get. Again, usually after the first one, there's usually a second one within an hour or so, usually.
We try to follow up as much as we can with information. We typically do not send out communication. We don't have an update yet. We try to be as accurate as possible.
But a point taken that perhaps we'll come up with, a time sequence. That's one of the things that under crisis communication from the police department, we'll give out an initial report, and then we try to promise a regular time interval to update people. So,
And we'll usually say something like, we'll follow up later in the day or this evening if we can, if we believe that we're going to be able to do that.
Parents are all friends, kids are all friends with each other. Do you only send it out to the school where there's an issue? Because the kids talk to each other too. So like the Western thing, everybody at Central knows because they're on teams together, et cetera. So how do you stop the, gossiping?
It could be a challenge. We've talked about that a lot, and it was on our PTA agenda just last month. And one of the suggestions, a new suggestion that PTA had was, can you at least, if a note goes out just to one school, let the officers at all of the schools know that note went out. And that way, if they're hearing something from their own school community, they can calm people down and let them know exactly what was in the note. But it's also difficult, and somebody kind of referenced it earlier, you can also over communicate and cause panic. And so, pushing a note out, something that happens at Western, for instance, that we're working on. And it's really not an issue where we're concerned about all 15 schools. It's something very specific. We're investigating. We don't want to continually be sending messages out to different schools because we are a large school district. So we try to communicate with the families who are impacted and the staff who are impacted. Jonathan, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think we have two main rules when it comes to communicating. First one is be accurate and then be quick, but in that order.
And I'll add a third to that, which is you got to give the police department time.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're actively working this, whether it's an investigation or whether it's a true threat. I have to be able to do what? Get people there, get the right people there. Investigators could be anywhere from patrol officers to detectives to school resource officers. We're all converging on that location because it's still what? Safety and security of your children is our priority one.
Great, thank you. Before we conclude, can I ask Mr. Reeves one thing? Could we remind our folks about walking around our school campuses during a normal school day, like walking their dogs,
If
using
not, I
the
could be
playground?
happy to do that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, this is a problem that we're experiencing throughout the district because we have such a great relationship with our families and our community. The parents, dog walkers, community members like to walk around the beautiful school campuses during the school day. Please don't do that. It scares the students and the teachers when they see somebody walking around outside. The school campuses are closed to non-students or parents that don't have kids at that school during the school day.
That means you can't play tennis at Central. That means you can't walk your dog at North Mianus. That means you can't, there's so many different things to go
Can't
with
use the
that.
track at the high school.
Right.
Right.
during the school day.
During the school day, all facilities are closed to outsiders.
Fantastic. I want to thank everyone that came this evening to COSCOB. I want to thank the dozens of people back home watching on Zoom, and have a good night.
And we're here if you have any questions afterwards. I appreciate you guys coming out because it just shows you're committed to making sure your kids stay safe. So if you have any questions, feel free. We'll be here for a little while afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. Supranowicz.
Thank you.
And then you're.